Hey fourth grade, welcome to Mr. News art class. It's wonderful to see your smiling faces. In this series, we've been talking about the link between art and community and culture and how those work together and bounce off of each other. And so far, we've looked at hyper-modern culture of space and the hyper-ancient culture of cave paintings. In last week's lesson, when we looked at cave paintings, we noticed that they were painted directly onto cave walls. Now today, we're going to take a look at some more wall art painting directly onto walls, but it's going to take a more modern twist and have a very different style and purpose. Today we're talking about graffiti. Now when I say graffiti, one of the first words that should come to your mind is illegal. It's against the law. When you spray paint onto the side of a building that doesn't belong to you, and you don't have permission from the person who owns that building, you're defacing someone else's property. You're ruining somebody else's property. That's against the law. That would be like if I came into your house and started smashing up your toys. It's not okay. But there are some places where it is okay. This is a picture of Hoosier Lane, which is in Melbourne, Australia. Now, this alleyway, this whole road, this whole street is open to the public where anyone who wants to can come paint whatever they want, however they want, whenever they want. That's pretty cool. This is great because it gives some credence to the idea of the graffiti style of art, and there's a lot of really interesting ways in which street culture, thug life, hood culture, plays into the art that's made in the graffiti style. And you can make graffiti style art anywhere. It doesn't have to be on buildings that don't belong to you. You could, for instance, tag your own house, or you could use a piece of paper and draw some graffiti style art there. Or a lot of people nowadays are using digital tablets to create digital artwork in the graffiti style. But what does the graffiti style look like? Let's take a look at that. I mentioned earlier tagging a building. When you tag something, it's kind of like signing your name, but a tag is like a fancy way to sign your name in graffiti letters. And so here are some examples of graffiti tags. Notice that the letter forms are so distorted that they sometimes become very difficult to read. That's normal, that's fine. The idea is that your tag should be visually stylized in a way that's different from everybody else. Also, notice that the graffiti style uses bright, bold colors and dark, deep colors to contrast so that things really pop out. Today, we're going to use paper instead of a wall that doesn't belong to us, and we're going to practice coming up with our own tags. So the materials we're going to need here today are some kind of paper, a pencil, a Sharpie marker, and then something to color with. It really doesn't matter what. I'm going to start with step number 1, which is I need my tag to be related to me in some way. So it needs to be my name or my initials or something like that. What I'm going to do is my initials, because I can do those real big. Just make maybe my 3 initials, first, middle, and last. So that's the first letter of my first name, N, the first letter of my middle name, C, the first letter of my last name, N, and then I'm done. Yay, I tagged my, no. Because I want this to be fancy, guys. I want this to be stylized and interesting. And so that's step number 1, is to get your initials in place. Step number 2 is going to be to kind of make those into box letters. So this, or bubble letters, it doesn't have to be, this is not the final iteration, so it doesn't have to be perfect here. So I'm just kind of boxing around, and I can even like make a box that goes around multiple letters, right? So my boxes are kind of merging together. Okay, so it's like one box that kind of goes around all of my letters. Because remember, in the end, this doesn't actually have to be readable. It just needs to be recognizable as my special tag. Like, it might not look like the letters NCN when I'm done, but it will be unique, different from everybody else's. Okay. All right, then, okay, so the step one was to just write my initials. Step two was to kind of box those in, so I have a box that I could add color into. Step number three is to embellish and sort of expand and really make that box shape into an interesting, fancy shape. So what I'm going to do is come to the edges and corners and just change the edges and corners until it looks interesting, the way I like it. Maybe you want them bubbly, maybe you want them boxy, maybe you want them, with sharp points coming out of, I don't know, whatever. So what I'm going to do is kind of start by expanding this into sort of a diamondy shape and kind of making it curvy instead of straight. And as I do this, I'm going to kind of erase bits that I don't need. Okay, I could erase my original letter N out of the middle here. I don't need that. Maybe up here I want, I could go with this sort of diamondy, curvy diamondy shape thing idea. I could kind of do that at every corner, at every edge, or I could mix things up and try to do different things. There's really no wrong way to do it. But as I go, I'm kind of looking at the shapes that it's creating and thinking, do I like that shape? Is there something I could do to clean that shape up, make it look a little nicer? So like this one, I thought just needed to be a little taller and come out a little further on this side and be a little bit more rounded. And that's one of the things about graffiti is often because of the way graffiti is usually made with a spray paint can, you often get curves because it's real easy to like spray the can in a curve. It's a lot harder to do in a straight line with a spray can. So you end up a lot of times with a lot of curves in graffiti tags, especially when they're very large. Maybe I really like these diamondy star looking things and want to do them on the outside corners of my tag. All right, so I'm liking the way those corners are coming in. I think what I want to do is kind of utilize this curve and the way that that curve and that curve both curve down and in, and kind of merge that into the rest of my thing here. So like what that's going to do is if this curve is coming in, it's going to kind of chop off the top of the box there on the end. And I want these sort of curves to point towards each other, if that makes sense. Yes, that's coming along pretty nicely. I think I'll do the same thing on the bottom. And so I'm just going to try to kind of make this into a smooth curve all the way across, which means I'm going to cut off the top of my letter C. I'll just erase the bit that's cutting off. And so you can see how the shape of the C is a little bit broken. See how the shape of that C gets cut off at the top. And then this corner of the N is also going to get cut off. So it's important that I'm drawing this with a pencil first before I jump right in with a Sharpie. Once I know, like see, part of the thing is if it's a tag that is unique to me, that I'm drawing the same tag everywhere I go, then once I've drawn this 100 times, I could just do it with a Sharpie because I know how to do it. But the first time, you want to kind of plan things out with a pencil first because you know you're going to be messing things up and erasing and trying to get those shapes as nice and clean and perfect as you can. All right, so I think I want to do the same kind of thing I did here, but do it down, you know, inversely on the bottom here. So I'm going to have this curve here. So now, as I finish erasing that, I think I've finished up the shaping that I want. Now, does yours have to have this kind of shaping? No, we've seen a bunch of examples. You decide what kind of shaping you want for yours. And like I said, it could be kind of, you know, spiky, or it could be bumpy, or it could be like melting, or it could be wiggly, it's bubbly, whatever. It's up to you. You choose what kind of style you want to go with. And then I think I do want to kind of flare that out a little. Yeah. Do I want to do something here with the end of the C? I think I want to do it, but I think I want to keep it up a little higher. Like that, maybe. Yeah, that kind of fits well with the theme. Now, I think I want to do the same thing on the sides as I did on the top and bottom. We'll cut into the letter N here. Let this curve just cut all the way in. Right? Yeah, I like that. And I'll do the same thing on this side. The letter forms have sort of been repurposed and reshaped into this interesting design. Now, that's really step 3, I guess. Step 1 was we just wrote our initials really big. Step 2 was we boxed around them. Step 3 was we changed the shape of that box. Now moving into step 4, we need to figure out how this is going to be placed onto and like how it's going to interact with its surroundings, let's say. So, for example, if I was going to spray paint this onto just, you know, a wall somewhere, maybe on a brick wall, maybe on some other kind of wall, whatever, doesn't matter. I mean, I could like draw bricks in the background if I wanted, but I think what I really want to focus on here is the lettering, the letter forms. And what I think I'm going to come up with is some way to where like there would be some kind of a border that would stand out no matter what background I put it on. Does that make sense? So like if it was on a red brick wall, a red border isn't going to stand out. But if it's a red border with another second white border, right? If you have two borders, like a white border and a red border, or a red border and a white border, something like that, then it would stand out on a red brick wall or a white wall, either way, because it's got two borders. So what I'm going to do is think about layers, think about borders, think about shapes within shapes, shapes around shapes. And so what I'm going to do is kind of block in an extra border around my letters and just kind of mimic the shape. Now, I can do, here what I'm doing is mimicking the shape, but going for curvy instead of pointy. You see how I'm doing these curved edges? You could do it either way. Again, like I said, there's no wrong way. Part of the purpose of graffiti is showing your individual aesthetic. Aesthetic, that's an important art word, aesthetic. Aesthetic just means the way you see things, right? It's when we say the word aesthetics, we're talking about the choices you make as an artist about how things should look, right? And so my personal choice right here is that I think the pokey kind of star shapes will contrast nicely against a more rounded border. But you might think, I really want sharp corners, sharp edges. Or maybe you think, I don't like these star pokey pointy bits at all and I just want something completely different. Again, you decide. There's no wrong way. Alrighty, let's see. I'm going to finish up that border around here, around the bottom edges, and then we'll be ready to move on to color choices and pattern choices and see how we want to fill this thing out. There's other things I could do. I could do a drop shadow. I could do, well, I mean, the choices really, really are endless. I think I'm going to do a second border. While I finish this up, I guess I could think about colors. Now with colors, you can really choose any colors you want, but you want colors that are going to have high contrast. So this would be a good time to talk about light and dark, or different values. And it would also be a good time to talk about a color wheel and think warm and cool. So if we were using, if we want colors to contrast each other, then we would do a light color next to a dark color. That'll make them pop out. Or we would do a warm color next to a cool color. I'm going to trace this with a Sharpie while I talk about that. So a warm color, if you don't know what that means, you could think about the colors of fire. Red, orange, yellow, those kind of colors. Warm colors have a tendency to lift up or rise off the page. They feel like they jump out, especially when they are surrounded by cool colors. Cool colors would be all the other colors on the color wheel, which means blues, greens, and purples. Notice what colors are left out of that list. Warm and cool colors does not include black, brown, gray, and white. Those are neutral. So that doesn't mean we can't use black, brown, gray, and white. It just means if we're trying to go for warm and cool combinations, then we would want to stray away from black, brown, gray, and white. Maybe you want to go with black and white or black and gray or something like that. That'd be fine. That's up to you. If that's the case, then you still want contrast, so you would want to make sure, if you're doing like black and white or black and gray, you would want to make sure that you're putting bright colors like white next to dark colors like black. Or if you're using grays, then you would want like a light gray next to a black, or a dark gray next to a white, something like that. And if you're using warm colors and cool colors, the contrast of light to dark might still matter, but not as much. Like you could put a bright orange next to a bright blue, and it would still have contrast. It would have a color contrast instead of a value contrast. So anyway, I think for mine, I want to start by just thinking about what's my favorite color, because I like yellow a lot, so I think I'm going to use some yellow in this. That's my favorite color. Then I need to start thinking, well, what colors would contrast against yellow? Well, opposite on the color wheel is purple, so a purple would contrast against yellow. Or just black would contrast against yellow, because black is really dark and yellow is really bright. So I could really go either way. I could just go with dark colors next to the yellow, and I could even keep the whole thing warm colors. Just have like dark red next to bright yellow or something like that. Or I could go for just keep using bright colors and say I want my yellow to be with pink and sky blue, or whatever. Yellow with sky blue would be good contrast because they're a warm color and a cool color. But yellow with pink wouldn't be much contrast, would it? Because yellow and pink are both warm colors. And if they're both warm colors and they're both light, there's not going to be as much contrast. So I think what I'm going to do, I want to go for a yellow and purple thought. One other thing before I actually start adding any color. A lot of times graffiti art, not always, but a lot of times graffiti art includes patterns. Alrighty, so that is an extra step that takes a lot more time, but I really like patterns, so I did it. You don't have to do that, but I like patterns, so I did it. So all I did there was I just made a whole bunch of different patterns to fill that whole area, and now I'm gonna color. And like I said, I think I'm gonna start with yellow because that's my favorite color, and I'm just gonna color my my letters, my letter forms here completely yellow, and then my border around a different color maybe. One of the nice things about yellow is if I decide that I want to go on top of my yellow and do something else decorative on top of it, that's really easy to do because yellow is such a bright color. What I'm thinking is for to have like a shadow being cast onto, like my letters have a dark side, like they're kind of three-dimensional-ish. You know what, maybe just this purple is gonna be enough for that. I don't know, I might add some of the red to it. Again, these shadows are not a 100% necessary, you have to do this kind of step. It's more of a, this is fun, so I'm doing it. You decide what you would like for your letters, but keep going with the embellishments. Don't stop. Eventually, you're gonna run out of time and you won't be able to make any more embellishments, but hopefully by that point, you'll have quite a lot of different fun, cool things going on. All right, now that I've got those shadows going on inside my letters, another thing you could do, and it would be much more effective if my color wasn't white, wasn't so bright, you could use a white colored pencil to make highlights. I'm not gonna do that because the yellow is already so bright, it's not really gonna do a whole lot. I am gonna blend these two colors together for this last border. I want a reddish violet. So what I'm gonna do for that, whenever you're blending colored pencils, you wanna start with the darkest color, but shade it very lightly. There, so I have finished doing my purple very lightly. Now I'm switching to my red, and I'm gonna push harder with my red, and that blends it with the purple to make it into a sort of raspberry color. All right, so you notice here I left some gaps in my blending of color. I'm gonna come back in and do a little bit more of an advanced blending, have a little bit of a gradient here where it fades from violet to red violet, and that's kind of a more advanced trick that, again, like I've said like 10,000 times in this video, you don't have to do things exactly the way I do. You make it your way. You do you. I'm just kind of having some fun, doing some cool, fun things that I like to do, and putting some colors together that I like in ways that I like to see them go together. and making some patterns and some shadows and some stuff. There's no wrong way. So there's Mr. News NCN tag. I can't wait to see yours when you're done. Well, that's it for today. Now we've talked about 2 different styles of wall art in this discussion of different cultures and how community and culture work together with art. In next week's lesson, we're going to talk about one more type of wall art. The wall art we're going to talk about next week would be murals, which are a more fancied up version of just painting on a wall. I can't wait to see you then.